Well, Congress is on a 2-week, if you will, hiatus. But I do know one person is always working, and that is certainly Congressman James Comer, the chairman of the House Oversight Committee. And we're delighted to have him with us here today. Mr. Chairman, thank you for joining us. And I want to start basically with what was a very dramatic week of testimony. And it looks like real progress has been made in terms of the acceptance on the part of at least the media that, yes, your committee does have evidence against the Biden crime family.
Well, I hope so. I hope so, Lou, because we do have evidence. And what we heard from testimony last week from two former Biden business partners was that Joe was the central figure in the family's influence peddling scheme. We've already proven that Jim Biden and Hunter Biden have broken many laws. They've committed many financial crimes. They've been completely dishonest about their influence peddling. I would go further and say that we've proven through the testimony of Shapley and Ziegler, the two IRS whistleblowers, that they didn't pay a penny of taxes on the tens of millions of dollars that they took in from our enemies around the world. But what we heard last week was Jason Galanis say that Hunter told people that Joe was going to be an equity owner in one of their schemes between Hunter and Galanis. And then what we heard from Tony Bobulinski was the same thing. In another scheme with China, Joe was going to be 10% equity owner, that he was going to be the big guy. But he also said that he figured out that the Bidens weren't interested in any legitimate business, that they just wanted to be paid from China. They felt like they should be paid millions of dollars in return for granting communist China access to Joe Biden.
It's really breathtaking to think that the arrogance, the presumptuousness of it all, that they were simply selling the family name and access to Joe Biden, whether he's vice president, whether he's between jobs, or whether he's president. It didn't seem to matter.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's no business. And that's one of the things that our committee has determined, and the Democrats and the media aren't even challenging it. At the beginning of this investigation, the media narrative was the Bidens had a legitimate business. They had energy companies, they had investment companies. What we've proven, they didn't have anything but a bunch of shell companies that sole purpose was to launder money that they were taking in from our adversaries around the world, launder it through various shell companies to deceive the IRS so they wouldn't have to pay taxes, to deceive any investigators that were investigating their corruption, and then pay the Biden family, 10 different Biden family members, in incremental payments through those shell companies. What we've proven in the last week with that hearing was that Joe Biden was the closer of all the family deals. Joe knew exactly what was going on because Tony Bobulinski testified that Joe thanked him for what he was doing with his family. We know that Devin Archer testified in his transcribed interview that Joe Biden regularly got on the phone and called people. And that was kind of to do a wink and a nod to let the corrupt Romanians or the corrupt Russians or the corrupt Chinese say, hey, listen, I've got to plead plausible deniability, but I know very well what's going on. Take care of my boy, and I'll take care of you. And that's what we've heard from testimony. So we've been able to bring in Joe Biden and his role in the influence peddling scheme. And I think that was a very important hearing for us last week.
Oh, absolutely. A development, though, that I think is shocking to a lot of people is that the majority, in terms of the practicality of the impeachment inquiry, I mean, the Republican conference is down now to, what is it, a one-seat majority? What is the impact of that on your impeachment inquiry?
Well, it's not good, but think about this. The two members that have resigned abruptly in the last few weeks were two of the three that were going to vote against impeachment. So we didn't lose any votes. They lost votes. The media is trying to say, oh, the Republicans are losing members. Well, really, those two were kind of on the Democrat team, Lou. Gallagher and Buck. So they can have Gallagher and Buck. And you know, the media and Ian Sams and that group, they're trying to say, well, the impeachment's over. Impeachment is very well on the table. Criminal referrals are very likely imminent with this family. So I think that, you know, despite the White House collusion with the mainstream media to say that nothing happened in that last hearing and that impeachment's off the table. I can tell for 100% certainty on your show, impeachment is very well on the table. There's a strong sense of support to hold this family accountable. And most Republicans in our conference, if not all, believe that Joe Biden committed impeachable offenses.
Well, one of our favorite people who you have characterized, and I have to admit that I have plagiarized you, little weenie guy over at the White House, Ian Sams, is saying that, there's still no evidence. That seems to be his tune from beginning to wherever this goes.
Yeah.
Your reaction?
Well, that's just not true. And Ian Sams gets paid taxpayer dollars to stand up and lie to the American people like a little Baney rooster every week. And he's got a whole crew of 12 people. They're not focused on securing the border. They're not focused on trying to find waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal government. They claim they're the oversight team. Their oversight team, all they do is try to discredit me and Jim Jordan in the investigation. And their main phrase now is no evidence, no evidence. But no one argued during the last committee hearing that the Biden family was influence peddling. No one argued that they had 20 shell companies. No one argued that they've taken in at least $28 million for no known purpose in their influence peddling teams. What they're trying to say, Lou, is that, well, Joe didn't know. But the problem they have is we have 3 former Biden associates that have all testified that Joe was the central figure in the influence peddling scheme. So I don't think anyone's is trying to say that influence peddling is okay. What they're trying to say is that Joe wasn't involved, and that's counter to what we've had witness testimony. And that's why I've invited Joe Biden to come testify in front of the Oversight Committee, and he can explain why 3 former business partners that he all met with would say that he was involved when he wasn't involved.
And I thought that was a very generous offer on your part. And I can't imagine the President of the United States, with the counsel of Ian Sams, the little weenie guy, failing to take advantage of that opportunity that you're giving him. I'm also very curious about something. I really like to learn. I enjoyed learning about these diamonds. There's something about Diamond Joe Biden that kind of works as a moniker. Tell us where you think where those diamonds went, where they might be, and how important are they?
Well, they're very important because we know now that Hunter Biden received 2 diamonds from the Chinese. We know that's how China launders money into the United States. We know that China, deals in diamonds. And they deal in diamonds to what they call their princeling program. What China tries to do is go in and find vulnerable family members, sons of politicians, old decrepit politicians, and buy them off. And I mean, we've seen them do this in Africa. We've seen them do it in some of the Asian countries. Now, they've done it in the United States through Hunter Biden. He got 1 diamond while Joe Biden was vice president, and from China. And Hunter got a Porsche from Kazakhstan while Joe was vice president. Those are excessive gifts, and that is a huge ethics violation. Joe Biden never reported those gifts to family members. We're supposed to report gifts to family members, but I don't have any gifts to my family members. But if someone gave my son a diamond, I think they would have already gotten rid of me in the House of Representatives. We're talking about China doing this with Joe. Now, what Jim testified was, well, that diamond, he had it appraised and it wasn't worth anything, so he threw it in the trash. Now, I can tell you, no one in America believes that story, because even if Jim Biden got a diamond that wasn't worth anything, he would try to peddle it to somebody claiming it was a perfect diamond or something. So, none of the stuff that Jim Biden and Hunter Biden said to us in their deposition and interviews was believable.
Congressman James Comer, chairman of the House Oversight Committee. We'll continue our conversation in just a few moments. Please stay with us. We'll be right back.
Folks, did you know that over 90% of the pharmaceuticals in America are not made here? We saw during the China virus pandemic what happens when we are dependent on other countries like China and India for our most critical pharma needs. Recent clusters of respiratory illness have been popping up around the world, and in the United States, it's dominating the headlines. It's also shedding light on the need to be prepared for an unexpected medical emergency. Will you have what your family needs when the next crisis hits? Our good friends Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. Drew Pinsky over at the Wellness Company have just what you need with the Wellness Company's medical emergency kits. These kits include 8 life-saving medications with drugs like amoxicillin, Z-Pak, and ivermectin for you to keep on hand, along with a guidebook for safe use. From tick bites to COVID to extreme bioterror events, every scenario is covered. Go to twc.health/Dobbs and grab your medical emergency kit right now. Don't wait until you need it. Take control of your health today with the Wellness Company's medical emergency kits.
We're back now. We're talking with the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman James Comer. Congressman, an interesting development, sort of at the sideline of all that was happening on Capitol Hill, and that was with former Defense Secretary Chris Miller, alleging that he was threatened by the January 6th committee into remaining silent. Now, that was Trump's acting defense secretary. And he was intimidated by the January 6th committee. Now, I'm not surprised by that because he was not forthcoming about anything, and he didn't make a lot of sense, frankly, in my opinion. But I want to get your judgment as to what in the world is going on right now, where Miller steps forward, acknowledges that he was intimidated into effectively through the January 6th committee into not telling the truth.
Yeah, I think that what's come to light is the fact that the January 6th committee made up a lot of stuff. They were heavy-handed. I was a critic of January 6th committee from day one because it wasn't a legitimate committee, because the Republicans didn't get to put the members that the minority leader, McCarthy, wanted on there. They put who they wanted on there, the two Democrat voting members of the Republican conference, Kinzinger and Cheney. But, I've tried to withhold criticism of January 6th committee for a long time. But, it's to the point you can't anymore. They doctored evidence. They have just been dishonest. Their investigation is going to go down in history like an Adam Schiff investigation of Donald Trump. There were instance after instance where the January 6th committee has created false narratives, and it's completely lost all credibility. So I'm not surprised that they would do that. They were predetermined at the start to try to blame everything on Donald Trump and come up with the insurrection term that the guy, initially it was the guy that I can't even, whatever his name was, that had the bullhorns. He was the leader of the insurrection. Then we see videos where he's talking to the police. We see videos of the Capitol Police officer that testified, and he was fine. So the videos have shed light on the fact that this is another example of the Democrats misleading the American people through a disinformation campaign.
Well, some considerable disinformation emanating from the House Speaker's office as well. Mike Johnson said he was releasing those videos. We've now heard that from from him and from Kevin McCarthy, and it hasn't happened. And we also know that the January 6th committee destroyed evidence, plain and simple, straightforward. And as to your point about the illegitimacy of the January 6th committee, there's a man right now in prison, Peter Navarro, former senior advisor to the president, in charge of the White House Trade Council, who has been imprisoned based on his contempt of the January 6th committee. If you're not contemptuous of the January 6th committee, who would you be contemptuous of?
No, it's a terrible precedent that they've set, put Navarro in prison for an illegitimate committee that every day is proven to have made more mistakes at best and downright lies and fraud at worst. And I think that Barry Loudermilk's doing a good job with what he's got to work with in exposing this. But I think that, sunlight's the best disinfectant. And one reason I've heard, and I don't ever talk to Mike Johnson, but one reason I've heard that he hasn't released those tapes is because the Capitol Police don't want him to. Well, I don't care what the Capitol Police want at this point, because what we've seen from the videos is evidence that doesn't suggest one of the Capitol Police officers testified truthfully to the world about what happened that day. Now, look, I was there. I was one of the members who's on the floor, and that wasn't a good day. And I've always said that that was a bad deal that day. But I think what's happened is the Democrats have done what they always do. They've added to the story. They've created a lot of false narratives because their whole objective was to try to prevent Donald Trump from running for re-election. Right. And as a result, they have no credibility. I don't know what to believe on the January 6th committee. Right now, I don't believe hardly anything they wrote.
I don't think most people do. I think every poll I've seen shows somewhere between 65 to 70+% of those surveyed believe that the Biden administration is politically motivated in its efforts to the DOJ, that the J6 committee was politically motivated throughout. The American people are not stupid. They can be fooled for a while, but they're not stupid, and they've figured it out, and just in time, as far as I'm concerned. But let me ask you this: another development around your investigation, that is, suddenly we hear from the CIA, and we find out from a whistleblower that they blocked federal investigations of none other than our friend Hunter Biden.
Yep.
It's incredible what links they go to protect this family and Hunter Biden himself.
The number of times that this investigation has been obstructed by a deep state agency, whether it be the FBI, the CIA, the Department of Justice, the IRS, I've lost count. But with respect to this investigation, we've proven two things. We've proven the Bidens have committed a bunch of crimes, and we've proven that there's a deep state cover-up of the Bidens committing a bunch of crimes, because you had multiple government agencies investigating the Bidens. You had the Department of Justice in at least 3 different locations investigating the Bidens. You had the Securities and Exchange Commission investigating the Bidens. Now we learn we have the Medicare fraud division investigating the Bidens. You had the IRS investigating the Bidens, the FBI investigating the Bidens, and at every instance, they were told to stand down. At every instance, you don't have that many agencies investigating one family for that many different crimes and never have a conviction or anything else. And the only reason that Hunter Biden's in court tomorrow is because of our investigation, because they were set to give him blanket immunity were it not for the letter that Congress sent the judge in Delaware saying, look, he at least violated the Foreign Agents Registration Act, not to mention tax evasion and tax fraud. And she kicked that deal that Abby Lowell had with David Weiss out because she knew that there were a host of financial crimes that the president's son has committed. And what I think we found in the last few weeks, and we've proven, is that Joe Biden himself knew what was going on, and he was a central figure in the schemes.
A central figure, and at this point, knowing that the CIA wants to, not only wants to, but did block a federal investigation, is that going to be now a part of the investigation, or do you just simply move ahead?
Now, what I would like to see moving forward, we've come up on the Oversight Committee. We were supposed to investigate the financial crimes and get the truth to the American people. We've done that.
Right. What
we've uncovered through the investigation is that there was a cover-up. And I would like to see, as this investigation moves forward, we highlight the financial crimes and try to hold the Bidens accountable for the financial crimes. And then Jim Jordan with the Judiciary and then that Weaponization Select Committee focus on the cover-up, focus on the deep state, and all the mischief that the CIA, the FBI, the IRS, the Department of Justice have committed in not only obstructing Oversight's investigation, but obstructing all the different investigations dating back to the Irish whistleblowers, Gary Shapley and Ziegler. I mean, there are so many times that the deep state has stepped in to protect the Bidens. And I think that's where the investigation needs to go moving forward from a judiciary and weaponization standpoint.
And the Secret Service, just as a reminder, everybody, not refusing to produce visitor logs for the president and his family in Wilmington, Delaware, and their various vacation homes. We're talking with the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, James Comer. We'll be back in just one moment. Please stay with us.
Folks, did you know that over 90% of the pharmaceuticals in America are not made here? We saw during the China virus pandemic what happens when we are dependent on other countries like China and India for our most critical pharma needs. Recent clusters of respiratory illness have been popping up around the world, and in the United States, it's dominating the headlines. It's also shedding light on the need to be prepared for an unexpected medical emergency. Will you have what your family needs when the next crisis hits? Our good friends Dr. Peter McCullough and Dr. Drew Pinsky over at the Wellness Company have just what you need with the Wellness Company's medical emergency kits. These kits include 8 life-saving medications with drugs like amoxicillin, Z-Pak, and ivermectin for you to keep on hand, along with a guidebook for safe use. From tick bites to COVID to extreme bioterror events, every scenario is covered. Go to twc.health/Dobbs and grab your medical emergency kit right now. Don't wait until you need it. Take control of your health today with the Wellness Company's medical emergency kits.
We're back now. We're talking with the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, Congressman James Comer. No one is doing more right now for the public's right to know, leading these investigations and producing extraordinary evidence and a lot of questions, new questions. For example, the chairman just went through a list of agencies that have been covering up for Joe Biden, Diamond Joe Biden, we now call him. We're talking about a cover-up that extends to the Secret Service, refusing visitor logs. I mean, it goes on and on and on. At what point is there any point at which, I'll put it that way, that the deep state actually says, we have a responsibility to the federal government and to the American people, and we're going to quit protecting Joe Biden? I haven't seen any sign of it. Is there such a point?
It doesn't appear to be. I mean, they're hunkering down, as we say on the farm in Kentucky. They're not working with us. They're doing everything they can to obstruct. Look, we were supposed to have Jason Galanis testify in person at that hearing last week. We worked a deal out with the Bureau of Prisons to get him to Washington to testify. And then the DOJ goes in and stops that. They want him to testify virtually. They didn't want him to come testify publicly. Just little things like that. The people they've indicted right before we were set to interview them. I mean, and then the spinning false narratives to the media. I mean, they're not only obstructing, they're coordinating and colluding with the White House, with their, little Ian Sam's war room they've got in there to create false narratives about the investigation, not having any evidence. If there's no evidence, what did the Bidens do to receive the $28 million? And why did Joe Biden lie about me? People, they can't answer that, but the media doesn't press them on that. And I think that, I'll be honest, Lou, I think the House of Representatives missed an opportunity to hold the deep state accountable. The way to hold the deep state accountable was to cut their budgets. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. We fought and fought to try to get those budget cuts. Didn't happen. And I think that really took away some of our ability to hold the deep state accountable. Now, unfortunately, the way to hold them accountable is to elect a new president. And we know who that new president needs to be. They need to elect a new president, and he needs to go in and terminate every single person in the deep state that he can terminate.
And it turns out that Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, as well as the leader of the conference, I mean, who is he? He looks, at one moment, he looks exactly like Paul Ryan. Or if you take another look at him from a different angle, he looks like Kevin McCarthy. Only in some ways, he's every bit as bad as any one of those in what he's done. You mentioned the $1.2 trillion minibus, 75% of the federal spending, on one vote by the House of Representatives. This is the opposite of what was pledged to all of you by the succession of speakers in the 118th Congress.
My biggest disappointment was the House and Congress increased the FBI budget. They didn't decrease their FBI budget. They increased, and they threw in a $200 million brand new building for them. Unacceptable, completely unacceptable. I think there was a failure with the appropriations process. We Jordan and I expressed to the appropriators multiple times that we had agencies and divisions in the Department of Justice and FBI that needed to be cut. For whatever reason, I don't know why they can't break the budget down, and instead of doing a one size fits all, okay, we'll do a whole budget for the DOJ or a whole budget for the Department of Defense. Well, let's break it down. I mean, if we're ever going to hold spending accountable, you're going to have to break it down. There are agencies and programs that need to be funded, probably need to be increased in funding, but there are agencies and programs that need to not only be cut, but be eliminated. And you can't do that every year when you wait until the very last minute and just say, all right, we're going to do one massive bill and fund every cabinet with whatever they were funded in the previous year, plus a cost of living adjustment. That is a terrible business model. I thought we were going to do it differently this year. We didn't. I have my opinion of who all to blame, but at the end of the day, I voted no on the bill, and I'm pretty disappointed that there weren't agencies in the deep state held accountable for misconduct, because that's what they've done throughout this whole investigation. They have misconducted themselves. They have obstructed. They have colluded with the corrupt mainstream media to create false narratives, and they did not deserve an increase in funding. I'll put it like that.
Well, I think everyone watching everything that your committee and Congressman Jordan's committee would agree with you 100%. And the shame is that the 118th Congress had an opportunity to do something about it, as you point out. The tragedy is that the steps were not taken. Does Mike Johnson survive this motion to vacate brought by Marjorie Taylor Greene?
Yeah, I don't think that. The problem goes back to the beginning. If you get rid of Mike Johnson, who does the conference get behind? You got, I would say the two leading candidates would be Scalise and Jordan. Well, we've already been through that once, and some of the Jordan people won't vote for Scalise, and some of the Scalise people won't vote for Jordan. And with a one vote discrepancy now, you can't risk going to the floor, and Marjorie knows that. So I don't think it's going to go to the floor, because I don't think there's anyone that can get to 218, and the Democrats will all vote for Hakeem Jeffries. So it's too big a risk to try to, in my opinion. I told Marjorie that I love Marjorie. She's one of the best people on my committee, but we'll just have to see how that plays out.
Well, Congressman, we appreciate everything you're doing, and the American people would be poorly informed if it were not for the investigating committees of the U.S. Congress, the 118th Congress. I want to thank you very much. Congressman James Comer, thanks for being with us here on the Great America Show.